about South Africa in the context of they have been through an apartheid. So recently there is a company that has been supplying and erecting surveillance in rich neighborhoods, which predicts the likelihood of these crimes occurring. What they're actually saying is it will predict any abnormal kind of movement or anything that should be flagged. Now, what they don't tell you is this algorithm was first made for Australia and the UK. Now, when you translate what is normal there, and then you bring that straight up to South Africa, like already you're lost. You get, it's more or less, you are going to replicate the same systems that have been there for apartheid. Because again, it's the white neighborhoods who are affording to put up these surveillance things. No, that was not the worst part. The worst part is they are deploying military and police force depending on these surveillance things, which also means the black neighborhoods are not being catered to well, and that black people are also being arrested more within these white neighborhoods. So I think for me, it's the more I'm interacting with like these conversations or as we monitor some of these experiments that they're running, I think it's just blatant that whatever has been made and with using data sets for the West cannot just be lifted and put here without like further conversation or further like interrogation.
Thank you, Mwende, for that exhaustive response. Really quickly, I'd like to check in with Amber. Amber, can you hear me? Amber, are you able to hear me? All right, I'm sure he'll cut in at some point whenever he gets a connection, but I'll allow Bernard to go next. Similar thing, define these terms within your context and give us your experience.
Thank you, Shem. I think she said it all, but I will just re-echo what she said. AI bias being basically when these machines learn to have human prejudices, which makes sense because the data and information that these AI tools are trained on ultimately is generated by human beings. And as we all know, of all species, human beings are the worst. So the worst impulses of humanity in the end get to be reflected and exhibited by these machine learning tools. So it's not a surprise. If you buy a sandwich and it tastes very bad, in many cases, the oven really is not the one to blame. Probably the people that determine the ingredients at the back in the kitchen are the ones that messed it up. And therefore, what you eat in the sandwich is what the ingredients that went in there. You know, to see that this is having real-life consequences really is a very, very powerful demonstration of the risks and the dangers that are inherent in some of these tools. And I think it calls us to be careful. As much as the digital revolution has changed the world for the most part for the better, but there are also very serious dangers that we need to look out for. When it comes to data colonialism, again, I think that term colonialism is clear for most people that know anything about political and our historical discourse as human beings. And this is basically about the inequalities that exhibit themselves within data ecosystems around the world. And they are really not that different from the original colonialism, which is basically the fact that the very powerful countries jetting into weaker countries and telling them what to do and exploiting their resources unfairly. This happens a lot in data. Is ultimately going to control the world. So when you track who actually puts money into the data value chain, from the production of the data to analyzing it, to processing it, and to publishing it, it's really, really surprising. Even here in Uganda, you actually don't have to look for examples very far. If you look at, we are going to conduct a census this year. Now, a census is one of the most expensive exercises you can ever do, because data collection is ultimately very expensive. And for all the censuses that we've done, the last, I don't know how many of them, in many cases, when you actually see where the money came from for such an exercise, you tend to find a lot of donor interest in an exercise like this, and a lot of investments. Why is that important? Because, you know, when you are paying for an exercise like that, it also means you are going to determine what data is going to be collected, the tools to collect that data, and the methodologies to use. You are going to have a say into that. And ultimately, the data sets that are going to come out of that exercise are going to reflect the tools and the methodologies that were used to collect that data. So if I paid for those, therefore, these are the data sets that influence the whole ecosystem of the information marketplace. Actually paying for data production in third world countries, it means that this data increasingly will reflect the values of the people that paid for it. It's very subtle and insidious. You may not really see it very value chain. Even how data is used, it's going to be a problem. When you look at the power that these big tech companies have over our lives, by the way, many of them are very new. We are really dealing with a very new experiment. I don't think there is any big tech company that is more than 25 years old. Probably Google, founded in 1995, maybe, 99, thereabout. But Facebook is only 20 years old. I think it's a 2004 company. Many of you were adults when these companies were formed. And now they have such enormous power over our lives, we can barely imagine even existing without them. When you wake up every morning, the first impulse on your brain is to reach for your smartphone. Many of you keep these phones on your pillows. We really don't think about what a transformation these innovations have brought. Of course, as I said, it has transformed our lives, it has made life easier, but I think we also have to think about the drawbacks. We are seeing basically, because of disinformation, these companies leading to democratic outcomes in certain countries, election outcomes. Nobody would have thought about this just 20 years ago. It's very, very scary. So we need to be, very interested in this topic.
Thank you, Bernard. Amber, are you online?
Yes, hi, I'm here.
Hi, I'm glad to have you back. All right, so I don't know if you've been following closely, but two of the described AI bias and data colonialism from their perspectives. And I would just like you to do the same, but focus more on your particular experience at Policy.
Thank you. So I think if we think of historical colonialism, we usually think of 4 different factors. The first factor is that of appropriation of resources. The second factor is that through colonialism, you see a very unequal kind of social and economic relationship established. And the third thing that you see is the resources that were appropriated. There is a very unequal global distribution of the benefits of those resources. And finally, you see the spreading of an ideology to justify all of this. So when we use the term data colonialism, obviously this is not to trivialize the kind of violence and brute force that we have seen in the past during instances of historical colonialism, but to a lesser extent, we see some of the same patterns being repeated here. So, when we speak about resource appropriation, there is the data of indigenous people, there is the data of people who live in a particular country, the data of one's own community. And that data is largely being leveraged by big tech companies who are not based there and who do not necessarily work for the benefits of those communities. We see in the past, the kind of unequal social and economic relationship we've seen. We've seen that manifest in the form of slavery. We've seen that manifest in the form of forced labor. And now I think we see it manifesting in the form of unequal trading relationships. Then the benefits of the resources are largely accrued by the companies who have a first mover competition from local players. So that leads to the benefits of that data. Few small hands. And then the final thing about the ideologies which are used to explain some of this is, so in the past, we had, during the era of colonialism, we had discourse around how the colonialism was a mode to civilize the South. And I think now more and more what we see is discourse about formalization of particular forms of our day-to-day life. So formalization in the form of identification projects, formalization in the form of everybody having a digital identity and then using that digital profile to interact with the state, to interact with private bodies. And this is a very, very narrow vendor-driven vision of what formalization should look like. And that particular vision has essentially been forced, and also what we find is a failure on the part of governments to question it in any significant way. These are not being used loosely because there are aspects of colonialism and most importantly, the form in which a lot of these technologies are very, very extractive in their nature. Those are patterns that we see very clearly being repeated now. The second thing, since we are talking about AI bias here, and I think some of the panelists before me spoke about the fact that some of these systems are being built in context which is extremely different from the ones in which they're being deployed in the South, right? So a lot of these algorithms, these systems are being designed, let's say in California, they're being designed by a demographic of people who may not have a very clear understanding of the context in which they will be deployed in. And what that leads to is that it leads to problems at multiple levels. At the first level, obviously, if there are other people who do not understand you, who are going to look to solve your problems, that will inevitably have disastrous outcomes and consequences. The second thing is that because of the nature of the form of artificial intelligence that we have today, which is machine learning based. So the way machine learning works is that unlike previous forms of algorithms where you fed a rule to a computer and it would work according to those rules, here the algorithms are designed to essentially make up their own rules based on the technology also now are by their very nature opaque. And hence it becomes that much harder for us to question them, that much harder for us to comprehend why a particular decision is being taken. That lack of comprehension leaves us in a position where we don't know how to hold the system accountable in any way. I think that there was a suggestion in the session brief for this session which talked about the need for transparency and transparency in terms of opening up the code, giving people more access to that. But the issue is that even if you open up the code for something like this, for one, a layperson cannot really understand how this works. Even computer scientists or data scientists who work in that field, it's very hard to make some of these systems, particularly the ones that are based on neural networks, interpretable, in the sense that how do you move from data point A and B to decision C? It's very hard to draw a straight line and have a clear understanding that this is how the system came to a decision. So there's a lot of research. It's almost as if there is a trade-off between accuracy and explainability. So systems which are considered more accurate are actually of the technology that is being used. And this technology is not
Talk about those two terms from your perspective at Sunbird AI. What that looks like for you, what the data looks like, where these aspects get teased out from.
Great, thanks. So at Sunbird AI, we are Manchester United fans.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Without bias, I can say Man U is the best Premier League team. And this without bias, any bias at all. So I would talk about 7 points why some other teams are not good, but I won't go there. Okay, 8. All right, so I guess that's just an illustrative example. So if we had, I suppose if I was working here and I was serving, I was giving out water, and for example, half of this room this side were, just to give an example, Arsenal fans, for example, and this part was Man U. I would, if I was serving water, I probably would come and give this side, very likely. And the organizers would probably tell me to pass this side, and I would still pass this side and come and give this side water. So I would consistently make the same decision. So I think AI bias for us is really algorithms that keep making these decisions the same way in a certain way, disadvantaging some people. So AI really is about, I think the crust of it is really making decisions. So when you YouTube the videos you see, sometimes you think you're making the decision, but someone has sort of put these things in a certain order for you to make a certain decision. So it's really about decision making, right? If you go to a supermarket, the way they order things in a supermarket is not random. So they put things in a certain order that you buy them, right? They put sweets near the cashier and chocolates, and the cashiers deliberately So you keep looking at the chocolate and eventually buy the chocolate, right? So there is a certain element in decision making. And I think this is, so when that decision making is biased consistently, then you get AI bias. When the decision making favors a certain group in a certain way, then you get things close to data colonialism, right? So these models are built based on data. And if someone consistently or sort of tweaks your Twitter feed that you keep looking at messages about something alone, then they have a certain control over the decisions that you make, right? Because you're getting information from which you make decisions. So this inherently is what colonialism is, the data colonialism here. So I think at Sandbad, what do we do at Sandbad? So we do practical AI, and one of the key things we are doing is language technology. So trying to get language technology resources for our local languages. So things like automated translation or speech-to-speech. And in that sense, we are trying to bridge this gap that most of the languages on Google Translate are not our languages. So we are trying to sort of bridge this gap of bias and colonialism by doing that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ernest. If you don't get another chance to speak, you know what you've done. That's on you. Okay, all right. So let us talk about accountability. Okay? Everyone's talking about these big companies and all this data, and it's coming from somewhere, and terms like data colonialism. So they're huge players in the space, and they're huge drivers, whether it's big tech, whether it's big companies like development initiatives. But they're companies that have the muscle to get data from a bunch of places that they're biased towards, and the act of doing that has consequences across the entire world. But how do we hold these entities accountable? Okay? Now, when you're responding, as I see the wheels in your head spinning, you could think about big tech, you could think about NGOs. As we know, and Bernard, I know you're very familiar, that most of the high-quality data that exists on this continent is owned by large NGOs, okay, for example. So there's a problem therein, okay? But so I'm going to start from that side, and I will skip Ernest, I'm joking. And then we'll hear from Amber last. And try to be brief, we are running out of time. It is 3 p.m., we are supposed to stop at 3:30. So just talk as if you know we have 15 minutes, really, okay?
Okay. In terms of accountability, back to Walter Rodney and the flow of like just power and the people who have the power to actually like hold other people accountable. So as a colony, as colonies, as digital colonies, there's very little we can do on our end in terms of directly holding big tech accountable. I'm talking of Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. If you've realized, even TikTok has been a war between the US and China, yeah? And this is not by mistake. It's just the way, like, things, when you're saying colonialism, we want you to put into perspective how kind of little power we also have. And also when you look at our legislation, it's not catching up. By the time we put up laws for Facebook to, you know, reveal the way they move around the algorithm and whatnot, there's a bigger thing, they've evolved to the next thing. So I'm not so sure about holding them accountable. And then the second thing is about holding them accountable for this bias. It's also not possible to debias completely. This process keeps going through human beings. So we cannot debias this thing completely. What we can do is two things. One, ask for like a very sort of explicit eye into the workings. Like how exactly is this thing working? How does Facebook or TikTok algorithm work? How does that affect us? And of course, now the Facebook, this is as far as you thought about how it would evolve. How has that changed over the years? So basically, I do think just those two things on our end where we like keep pressure on the neck and keep asking the algorithm And the second thing is the shortcomings. What did you not foresee? And like, we are there now, so yeah.
Thank you. Bernard?
Thank you. I think if I could start from the data colonialism bit, in my view, I think the first, it's not a very easy thing to do to sanction. All this data we are dealing with is not held in repositories that are here in Uganda. Many of them are in Europe, abroad. And so is outside the jurisdiction of our laws to an extent. But also I think, for me, one thing that our governments need to be doing is to invest more in their own resources into, for example, data generation. And I think there are some examples already that is happening, where local agencies are actually, taking initiative. If you look at NITAU, for example, the National IT Agents of Uganda, there's a government data center, and I think there are rules you are not supposed, I think they are trying to introduce rules that you are not supposed to keep government data, outside certain jurisdictions. So that is one good sign. But also, I'm always worried of sanctions by legislation, because you see, rogue regimes, especially these governments in the global south, sometimes tend to weaponize legislation. Because ultimately what we want is a better, technology that is serving people better, but not to shut it down. You cannot kill something because it has shortcomings. So things like shutting down Facebook is not the solution to ask for some accountability from it. So why are you worried about using laws to check some of these excesses is that there is a tendency to go overboard and weaponize some of these laws. And I think we've started seeing some of that, like through the Computer Misuse Act and other things. Then the other thing, of course, is to, make sure that there is the education. People are aware. I think you can reduce some of the harms caused by some of these organizations if users really know better. In many cases, there's this thought by some users that your data is safe, that you actually have privacy, which is completely wrong. As long as you've hit send on that app, you are not in control anymore. And many of our young people especially do not know that. They trust some of the greatest mysteries and the secrets our young people have. They are on those phones. They will do anything to make sure that you don't get access because they think that is safe, which is, of course, not true. So I think when you are a user, you also need to be responsible. I think that is an important thing to bear in mind. When it comes to resources or countries taking initiative and being more independent, we still have a very, very long way to go. At development initiatives, we one time assessed, for example, how much the government of Uganda actually puts into research and development, data collection, and if you draw a chart, you will be surprised. There is no money being put in. All the databases that ministries are running are funded by foreigners. All the information management systems, and they are all funded by foreigners, which is really a very dangerous thing. I don't think these people know that you are literally outsourcing something so important to the country's sovereignty to outside players. Because when they are funding these systems, it means they have access. They control this information. So I think maybe government also needs some awareness. I don't know.
Thank you, Bernard. So, Ernest, do you want to speak?
How to sing, man? How to sing a song? Okay. Yeah. So, so on accountability, I think two ideas. Just one is a philosophical idea. Should we hold them accountable because they are big? I mean, sort of similar to asking, should Masaka, hold Kampala accountable? Should they say, you guys, because you're in Kampala and you send all our food there, we hold you accountable for something? I don't know. That's a tough question. I think the second point is maybe the value of the data. So if I think this was something someone talked about some time ago. If Google was to tell you, okay, we are going to remove all our services from you, and then you keep your data, your individual data, I think many of us would make the decision that, no, it's okay, let me keep the services, and you guys, just do your thing. Yeah, just do your thing. Because the value of our data collectively may not be, is important, but individually it's not too important. Oh, wait, this is a controversial statement. But but I think what I want to bring out is we also have to look at the services these big corporations give us, right? And the miles we have sort of made just because of a lot of technology pervasiveness. And then, coupled to that, I think is mainly just the 2 points you mentioned. One, I think individual accountability, or Meta needs to, be accountable for this. And then two is the government. Of course, the government, the bodies, we are part of the government, needs to make, good regulation that makes sure this balance of benefit and is kept, that our data is important, we need privacy, but we also need the benefits that come from technology. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Amber, you online? All right, again, I'm sure he'll cut in at some point. Okay, so thank you guys for your submission on that. I really like what you had to say. So, because I always tell people, is this the case of, should we just build our own things and negotiate where we can for the partnerships that are bigger than us? It's a bit of a closed-ended question, but I'm thinking, we obviously, when Facebook was started, for example, Facebook was started at Harvard with an intention of just getting a bunch of Harvard students to communicate, and now Facebook is shut down in Uganda, sort of, and businesses struggled for a long time, right? And no one really saw that kind of impact. No one thought Facebook would be that impactful all these years later. And so I find it hard to complain about the data mining that happens on these platforms and done by these big corporations because, we were never really the target market. The things just kind of grew out of control. So what I want to hear from you now is what can a Uganda do practically to take ownership of this space? And I love what Sunbird AI, for example, is doing with practical language learning models and things like that. I think that's sort of a sense of what I'm inclined to think works. But what do you think? Because we're coming around the end. So I want you to tell me practically, from your perspective, with your industry behind you, what do you think Uganda can do to take ownership of this space? Whether it's the technology in AI, whether it's taking ownership of the data collection process, the analysis process, taking ownership or taking a stronger stance in negotiating partnerships as far as our data, because we may not have the capacity to collect, to harness the power of big data, maybe not yet, right? But we can negotiate partnerships that leave us in a strong point, okay? Practical and prescriptive, what do you think?
So first, I don't have good, extremely good context for Uganda, but I'll give just a collective thought of practical things I think we could do. So one is to say that this technology is not an enemy. That's not what we are saying. We're not saying that Facebook should die or that we need to create our own Facebook. That's going to take eons and too much resources to build. Now, what we are saying is we need to, one, the data sets. We need to start having conversations around the data sets feeding the algorithms within this big tech, Like we need, when we say the algorithm and data sets, so, or even here, but like in a very biased kind of system. So we need to have like more conversation on the transparent and better sourcing of data. So for me, one, the data sourcing is a very key thing. Number two, diversifying the teams which are working on algorithms and everything. Case in point, if today we were to build an
Manchester United.
So you see, like just from this panel, you can already see that if you were to build something, it's very possible that also it will be an elitist because you're not going to be seeing just based on people's like lived experiences and things like that. So I do think having a team that's more diversified and also multidisciplinary. I was so sad to hear that the students outside sciences are not getting help. And that's sad because when you say multidisciplinary, the techies can create, but you need the artists and the social scientists to come and tell you things about this algorithm that don't make sense for this certain context. So I'm also very keen on, like as East Africa especially and Africa, we must bank the arts, we must bank the social sciences, and we must have those people sit at the table when these things are being done. Then lastly, I do think that it's important to keep auditing the AI and the algorithms as you go. You can't just do, as in the society is evolving every single day. So anytime you deploy the AI, let's say if I deployed the AI last week in Uganda, chances are when I am bringing up another version next year, the society has shifted a bit. So I can't just come in and relaunch and just keep going. I do think it's important for us to keep having audits. For this is what is happening. This is the shortcomings of our technology so far, and this is how we can beef this thing better or not. So those are some of the prescriptive things I could do.
Thank you. Bernard.
Yeah, I agree again, yet again, with everything she said. I think, for me, I have hope because I can already start seeing some pointers to action by government in Uganda here. When you look at the legislative landscape, when it comes to the digital transformation agenda in Uganda, I think it's becoming quite robust. Of course, we have the fourth industrial revolution strategy. We now have a digital transformation roadmap. We have a data protection law right now, I think overseen by NITAU, under the data protection office. We have an e-government master plan. We have so many laws that are coming up. And that, to me, tells me that maybe somebody is actually thinking in there, and they are trying to anticipate how they are going to manage this new revolution that we are facing. As I told you, this is completely new. You know, in the government speak, something that's 20 years old is not very old. We are a very young population here. People don't know that the average population of Uganda, the average age is 16. A typical Ugandan was born in 2006. They may not know, but these are very new platforms. The government is almost struggling to know how to deal with them. Even in the justice system, for example, when you report a case of cyber crime, a few years ago, the courts didn't know how to handle it because these crimes were new. They were not in our criminal code. The statute was not well prepared. But they have started, I think, making the legal landscape robust, which is a good starting point. And again, supporting, for example, our local startup ecosystems. These people that are tinkering with innovative ideas on how to safeguard data, on how to provide, to protect. How does the saying goes? I think you know. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ernest. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, so how do you know the panel is getting to a close? The moderator always asks, so tell us in the last few minutes, what are the practical things we should do about X, Y, Z?
Listen,
that's
Ernest.
how you know. Yeah, anyway, so I have a philosophical idea about this question. If someone always stopped you there right where you are and say, you want to be successful in life, tell me, what are the practical things you should do now? I mean, it would be quite hard to sort of enumerate them. So I won't even go there. But I think maybe the question, one way of looking at the question, what should Uganda do? I think even the idea of collecting data sets and making sure, like what we're doing, trying to collect local data sets in language, I think the key thing is why should Uganda do that? I think the why is more important. And I think what he said, I think this idea of context is extremely important. What is our context? What are the problems in our context that we need to solve? I think this should be the first starting point. And then all these technologies and things can come on board. But it always seems to me that we always get the problem wrong. Now we are trying to move people from a peasant society to, I don't know, middle income or something. Yeah, we're never going to catch up. But anyway, this is, I think, defining the problem really well and then strategizing, solve it is the key thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Amber, are you online?
Am I audible?
Ah, fantastic. All right, yeah. So I don't know how much you heard, but we were giving sort of practical and prescriptive solutions to the challenge of AI bias and data colonialism.
Yes, so, I think the first thing I would say is that we need to always remember is that these problems are not a zero-sum game. It's not a question of either or. Right? So earlier you were talking and you were saying that if you're faced with two extreme options, whether to for most of us would be to say to let them continue. So if you think of regulation as a spectrum, right? So on one end of the spectrum you have complete forbearance. You're allowing everybody to, so it's a wild west. Anybody can do whatever they feel like. And at the other end of the spectrum is complete ban, where nobody can do anything. Now the best solutions are somewhere in the middle. We have to only the not exploitative. I think we made references to the data protection law in Uganda, for instance, and other digital policies which are coming up. So these are all steps that we can, of small steps. For the time, I'm going to pause there.
Thank you very much, Amber. All right. At this point in time, I would like to open it up for questions from the crowd. Do we have a microphone? All right, so... Okay, go ahead and start.
Thank you very much. I don't think I really have a lot of questions, but I think I've picked up something that I want to re-echo here. This is more so... Let me stand up because I like it when I'm up. This is more so on the issue of data colonialism. The same way colonialism happened a long time ago is the same way it's happening now because we have said data is the new oil. The ones that cannot go for the underground resources now have to come for the digital ones. The question is, how do we deal with our priorities? What is important to us? And are we vigilant in everything? If we don't answer those questions, we shall see a lot of messing ups happening. I was very sad to see an investor coming to Uganda, all in the name of having an idea similar to mine oil. I don't know the name, but it's this gentleman who acted this movie, Empire. He came here and he was talking a lot of scientific is. What is it coming to do with the ideas he's bringing? Is it our priority? What is it going to do with our data? What are our priorities before we call them investors to come and take up from us? Because I know every morning, this is not for a bad cause, we were coming for this, our emails were taken, but it's for a good cause, I understand. But the issue is they want to know this one came, so and so came. So the vigilance was seen by Elon Musk. That's why the Twitter deal did not work for a long time. It was like, I need to know who are real users of the Twitter, of the platform. So that's how we exercise vigilance on the data that we have to avoid data mining that happen. We have a lot of ads. As we stated, the AIs can actually, the AIs can sometimes be what? They can be biased. If you really want to go for masters and you're over researching about masters and masters, the ads you'll get is on master opportunities only. That's what we'll be seeing. This came an embarrassment for a colleague of mine in a very high-profile meeting. We were talking about porn here. But I believe this person's search engine is always porn. And he was supposed to make a presentation, and was supposed to share the screen, and he was using an online presenter where he designed his PowerPoint, but he has on his search engine a porn thing. We've got entertained for some few moments, but it was an embarrassment for him. So the question that goes to us is, how careful are we with what we do? So I think I can recommend that working with an incognito is the best, so that at least you be discreet. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Another question? I'm about to carry my mic to you.
Thank you so much. I think mine is less of a question than of a comment. What I see, and I mean, it's a great panel, and we get exciting insights. Working with politicians, however, many times you realize the understanding of the value of the data is not there. So, and also to put, for example, those in government or in power to account, or to look actually into the ways how maybe they could protect data or sell out data. You have mentioned it. Not a lot is being done in terms of investment into collecting your own data. But I would go even beyond it, not only collection, there are negotiations and there are contracts that are signed with foreign companies where Uganda is giving out data deliberately, data of all of Ugandans to a country that we, for example, know for being in very authoritarian regime and whose companies, are really dependent on actors out there. And to be honest, I have not heard any outcry on the side of the civil society or on the side of the political opposition that, for example, number plates of Ugandans now should be produced by a Russian company and have a tracker in it so that every single moment somebody knows where you are moving. Where is the outcry that it's not about the sovereignty of our country, it's about our data? Because just think about it, which data are you giving out to get a number plate for your vehicle? You become completely transparent. So it's not even about those steps that might take a few levels of understanding how to protect the data, how to be able to invest into the data, but not just to give it out. The importance and the value of the data are those persons in the government. And I believe that there is a big, big lack on the side of those, basically all of us, right, in our countries, in our respective countries, who we need to really hold our governments to account, to look into it and to understand it so that we are able to do it. Without this knowledge, without these skills, we will just let the people in power rule over our data. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Another question? If you are not paying for the product, you are the product. Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much.
Question?
Yes, a question. Once again, my name is Ahura Ivan from the Alliance for National Transformation. My question to the panelists, we have been discussing data colonialism, mainly that comes from the external sources. And to me, yes, country. I have, of recent, I was following a site and I was told that in China, you receive, and there are those that you can't receive, yet a person outside China on TikTok can receive this. Prepare ourselves as we are growing in this technological space, that if we have at one point an authoritarian regime, a dictatorial regime, I have deliberately used that one time. If it is not this, then they cannot receive it at all. So how can we be prepared as a citizenry to overcome that kind of AI bias and data colonialism that originates from the people that lead us instead? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll just note that down. We'll take more questions, unless there aren't any more.
Yes.
Yes,
over
please.
here. Yes. Once again, it's Mark Ngozi.
Where is he?
Over here.
Ah, okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Bigger than even states. They are more powerful, have more money, have more data, and are even providing services that even the state itself needs. Yeah? In addition to that, we are willingly and freely giving away our information without even a second thought. You need an email, you just fill in whatever they ask you. They put an offer to win an iPhone, you just put whatever information that you want to put in. And in addition to that, as my brother here had said, to expand a bit on his comment, these tech companies have figured out even how to get our information without us necessarily knowing through our devices, our smartphones and our computers. That means your camera can be on without you knowing. Your microphone can be on and send data without you being aware. And you can see that without too much actually. You don't need to do too much to see it. Yeah, that's about it. So what do we do? Yes, it's a question. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So,
We have time for about 2 more. So maybe the gentleman back there, and then is there anyone else? So just you and then that gentleman, and then we'll be done. Thank you.
okay, thank you. My name is Immaculate, and you were talking about data collection, and I'm sure most of us, we are familiar with the Google. It does not favor most of us. You will agree with me on that. So my question is, when you notice that the law without an alternative, right? So what alternatives are actually available, if any?
Hello? Can you hear me? I'd like to, in a way, respond to the colleague seated on the other side. I hope his name is Derek. When he asserts that colonialism is happening as bad as it was happening back then, I think what we are faced with is data capitalism and not data colonialism. Colonialism was forceful, extractionary, and we give it out willfully. But on the other hand, do we have the tools, if we were to harness this data, do we have the tools to put it to practical, useful things for ourselves? And I can give a simple example. Across the road is a hospital. If there was a call and someone needed blood of blood group A, are we able to tell that amongst us, or the people within the neighborhood of a hospital, there is someone who carries that type of blood and is able or is available at that moment to go and give blood? So unless we can develop tools that can transform the data that we obtain by ourselves into meaningful things for our society, the things that we relate with on a daily basis, can we then therefore complain about someone else transforming our data that we willfully give out into things that benefit his society or his business or his empire? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think your input ties in very nicely with this gentleman's question about dealing with our priorities. And then also what Anis said about figuring out our why we need to collect the data and what for. I think that makes complete sense. Is there any other question? Yes, one more question. This is the last one. If you are battling the urge to raise your hand, now is the time. Go ahead. Oh, you need a microphone.
Thank you so much. My name is Agaba Nelson. Threat is a global threat. And the only way I think we can tackle it, the way I mentioned, there is one session I mentioned, there are issues that now are global, that even interventions to hold accountable those multinationals, because somebody mentioned, like Google, like Facebook, and other companies are too big, even than states. Even you find that losing a multinational like Google, Africa at large itself is losing. So we need to have a global front to G20. You find that your voice is not heard. So what do we do as a correct, because of people's data? That's something that we need to think about.
Thank you very much. And I think there's a lot of, you can hand the microphone. I think there's a lot of what can we do, which always harkens to a sense of helplessness. And I think, is this telling me to, yep, 5 minutes. Okay, so before I let each of the panelists give final words, I do want to say that I think to address what you said, do we have any representatives from government in the directly answers your question, which is, and it also speaks to what Bernard said about, besides the need for our government to invest, our government also needs education. Because we have stakeholders in government that do not necessarily understand the breadth or the scope of this challenge and this problem. And with a limited understanding of that issue, it's hard for you to see that he's presenting in public. So I think there's a need for some sort of either education and government, and I think organizations like Policies sort of have initiatives to that regard as they interact with government. But even better, it's just voting people into government that have that knowledge. But that's maybe not now. But yeah, so what I'm going to do at this point is we have 5 minutes. I'll start with Amber if he's online. Amber, are you online?
Yes, I'm here.
I don't know if you've been able to follow the conversation, but I would just like you to give some closing remarks based on the sense you get of where the conversation has gone. But closing remarks around the entire topic. You have 30 seconds. No pressure.
Okay. One of the comments which spoke about the threat of data colonialism from within a nation state, I think, is also a real one. We do see examples like that from my own context, which is coming from India, for instance. So I think when we do recognize these, we have
this time round?
Just one sentence?
One sentence.
Well, that was one sentence. Anyway, yeah, I think I just want to say, I think maybe a thought experiment. If you had a lot of data in your head, right? If you had knowledge of pharmacy, you'd be able to make probably very good decisions, right? And so this is the importance of data, mainly to understand which data supports that. As someone said, if someone needed blood now, wouldn't know here. Yet this should be information we know already. So I think we
say these companies are too big, even global superpowers are grappling with how to deal with them. You know, when Facebook, I think, and they weaponize that data by targeting ads to voters of a certain demographic, and some people believe that it contributed greatly to the victory of you know who. So they've been trying, actually, I think there's even a bill in the US Congress on breaking up these big tech companies, but because of the very powerful lobbying that they do, they have not succeeded to do that. So a global approach, I think, may be to address a certain contribute to that. But I also want to agree with what Anna said. As Uganda here, she made a very important point. We are actually giving data en masse every day to these initiatives without even thinking the drawbacks from this. She gave an example of the number plate tracking that's being proposed, but that's not the only one. All the companies that process our driving licenses are not Ugandan. Our passports, they are all foreign companies. All the telecom companies that we give our data every day, none of them are Ugandan. How are we safeguarding that? So there is a lot of trust that we've put in these companies. Unfortunately, when you trust wholesomely, sometimes you get disappointed, isn't it?
Thank you, Bernard. Mwende, you have the privilege of going last.
Okay. So first, let me just answer some of the questions you've asked based on my experience as an open source intelligence expert. So one of the ways you can stay, you did mention incognito. Yes, you can also use browsers that don't track your cookies. That's Firefox does not track. There is also DuckDuckGo. There is Tor. So you can utilize some of these free VPNs, which help with like the algorithm things. Then with the mics, those are not suites. You go there, click and accept the functional ones only. Those ones make your experience on our website more seamless. Any other cookie is going to be tracking the things you're doing, the time you're spending and whatnot, and that will be utilized to market and whatnot. Then lastly, with the microphones and the cameras on your phone, you have access on your settings and the accessibility and privacy. You can set who has access to what. So do not just, like when it comes to your phone, as the panelists are saying, everything that you have within yourself, you need to protect it. You need to also have personal responsibility over some of these things. Like, you can actually just diminish. And to finish it off, remember that AI is not an objective master. AI is subject to bias, and you need to approach it with that knowledge every time you're interacting with it. So yeah, thank you.
Bernard, thank you, Ernest, thank you, Amber. Thank you to our audience. If I would extract one word from each of them, I would say Amber, context, Ernest, why, Bernard, education and investment, Mwende, multidisciplinary. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
company called Rocket Health can deliver health services on a phone and has changed telemedicine completely, should tell you that what you young people should be thinking about is how can we best use these technologies to empower ourselves in the governance game. Don't what technology best serves your interests and for which audience, and then figure out how to leverage it. What I'm challenging Josephine here is for people to deconstruct their thinking and their stereotypes about technology. And that if you're going to advance civic engagement, if you're going to advance the agenda, you're going to have to be as unconventional as the process of technology development and growth is happening. We may be obsessed with these technologies. It's good to know them and how they work. But the most important thing for you guys is work out how does it serve the cause that you are advancing.
Just a small recap on what we had earlier in the morning in case you missed those sessions on free governance and also civic engagement on social media. Now, next we have, same as the arrangement we had earlier, we're going to have expert roundtable discussions happening in here and then a workshop happening out back in the training room. I will read for you the event, the session happening in the workshop area. It is social media, IP, which is intellectual property, and the case of unprotected creators. I'll read that again. Social media, intellectual property, and the case of unprotected creators. This is in cooperation with KQ, that is Creative Arts and Culture. The session happening in here, the expert roundtable, is going to be about digital privacy and protection, drawing the line for digital ethics and data governance, in case you want to stay here and have that expert roundtable discussion. But if you want to be in the training group, have a round of applause for our partners, CAS, yeah, and also the panelists who have been here. It's been amazing. And we know you're very tired, but in case you want something to eat, a refreshment, there's some refreshments at the pantry, so you can pass by and grab something through that door at the back on your right. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed plenary session 2. Now let us switch to workshop 3. Don't miss social media, IP in the case of unprotected creators in cooperation with KQ Hub Africa. We also have expert roundtable 3 on digital privacy and protection. Drawing the line for digital ethics and data governance in cooperation with Personal Data Protection Office, Ministry of ICT. Enjoy. Remember to take a social media break. Creators in cooperation with KQ Hub Africa. We also have expert roundtable 3 on digital privacy and protection. Drawing the line for digital ethics and data governance in cooperation with Personal Data Protection Office, Ministry of ICT. Enjoy. Remember to take a social media break. Hope you enjoyed plenary session 2. Now let us switch to workshop 3. Don't miss social media, IP in the case of unprotected creators in cooperation with KQ Hub Africa. We also have expert roundtable with Personal Data Protection Office, Ministry of ICT. Enjoy. Remember to take a social media break. Hope you enjoyed plenary session 2. Now let us switch to workshop 3. Don't miss social media, IP in the case of unprotected creators in cooperation with KQ Hub Africa with Personal Data Protection Office, Ministry of ICT. Enjoy. Remember to take a social media break. Hope you enjoyed plenary session 2. Now let us switch to workshop 3. Don't miss social media, IP in the case of unprotected creators in cooperation with KQ Hub Africa. We also have expert roundtable 3 on digital privacy and protection. Drawing the line for digital ethics and data governance in cooperation with Personal Data Protection Office, Ministry of ICT. Enjoy. Remember to
each other. If you're moving out, please move out with your bag. Walk around with it all the time for safety purposes. Please move in front in case you're going to stay around for the expert roundtable.
The way social media type of content that they are fed. Now, we as Ugandans, if we choose to feed these tools with a lot of selfies, fun videos, and a lot of that type of content, we're not going to benefit ourselves in terms of civic engagement on these platforms. Neither are we going to be able to have that critical mass that we need to be able to engage in democratic conversations. So the type of content that we feel this world to undermine civic freedoms or civic space. For example, in Qatar, we know that there are AI platforms that are used to cut out certain conversations, like the Me Too conversations. And other parts of this world, that happens. China has been very active at cutting out the Me Too conversations and those types of conversations as well. So AI can be used to, one, monitor conversations about civic space online, and then in the context of peaceful assemblies online, through use of hashtags or other conversations that we had Christine talking about in Kenya. Them, one, for arrest, and two, for harassment, either online or physically. So we have, in terms of promoting civic engagement, we have to be mindful of the pitfalls. We have to be mindful of the promotion or the advancement of AI in terms of civic engagement and other issues that we're dealing with here. The type of information that we feed the machine or the tech is going to determine how those tools behave.
The fact a company called Rocket Health can deliver health services on a phone and has changed telemedicine completely should tell you that what you young people should be thinking about is how can we best use these technologies to empower ourselves in the governance game. Don't spend too much time worrying how the technology works.
To introduce herself. Stella.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stella Alibatese. I'm the National Personal Data Protection Director. I head the personal data protection because many of you may not know about it. It's less than 2 years old, and it's the office that is mandated to regulate the collection and processing of personal data in Uganda. Thank you.
Of privacy and protection, drawing the line for digital ethics and data governance And I think it's a good time for us to get to understand what is data ethics and digital governance. And I will invite Gerard Businge to just give us a bit of what you understand by that.
Okay. Good evening. Gerard Businge Atenyi. I'm a digital media trainer. Been teaching digital media for the last more than 10 years at Makerere, and we support so many other universities. This evening we are talking about digital privacy and protection. We have already discussed in the other sessions about the prevalence of digital data that's being collected every time you switch on your phone, even as you are moving, every time you enter into any website. So across the world, there has been movements led by UN to develop good practice principles that can be followed to ensure that people are protected, especially their privacy, and that there is no harm that will accrue to them by use of these digital tools. And that's what you're talking about, digital privacy and protection.
Thank you so much, Gerard. I think now at this point, as we get into the discussion, I just want when you post on social media, do you wonder who would then access the content you post on social media? Is it private? Is it public when you post on social media? And at this point, I will invite Stella to just give us a comment on the topic.
Thank you very much, Sandra. The topic that we have today, which is digital privacy and protection, is very important, especially in relation to data ethics and TAIET. You know, all Makerere dons are doctors. So I'm willing it to you. So as Gerard indicated, these digital ethics are those data practices. I came in a little bit late from the previous session, and I picked some of the issues that were being discussed in the question and answer session. And many of them were about questions like, how do they use my data? Where is this data stored? Who do they share this data with for us to discuss? When I look around the room, many of you are very young. I may be the oldest in this room right now. But many of you are already on social media. You post on a daily basis. Some of you are addicted to posting. One of the things that I normally tell people who use social media, it's very addictive. First of all, we are never forced to go on social media. So when you're on social media, think about it. All of us here are over 18. Why do you join social media? You want to connect. How will you connect? By seeing other people on these platforms. When you're on social media, you want to share your life story, maybe. Or you want to share what's happening with you. So even without being forced, you start posting. How many of us know people who post like at 6 a.m. when they've just woken up? They enter their car at 7:30 and they post. They reach the office at 8:30 and they post. Their boss annoys them and they post. This is not Google telling you to post. It is something that you're doing. I know that there's a lot of work for me to do, for government to do, for civil society to do, for all of us here to do. Because most of this information, we provide this information willingly. And we post it in a public forum. We know that when you post on Facebook and you've not used those privacy settings the lady here was talking about, it will be public. Sometimes I can even just put privacy settings so I can see everything that is going on around me, but they are not very rare to see me post pictures of my children? Why are we posting? You know, be a private space, but these days we post. So I thought it was very important for me to talk about these things, because as we talk about the misuse, the biggest work is also within us. Must you post everything? Must you activate your location details? You know, someone travels and immediately 1,000 people are able to see this person is in California. What happens if someone has been targeting your house and they want to steal your things? That is the best time, because they can track exactly where you are. Now, despite our behavior, the issue of digital ethics and data governance comes up because these organizations that collect this information have a responsibility to protect us. They have a responsibility to tell us, to inform us. You can easily see that are easy for you to understand, so that you're able to make an informed decision. That when I post on Facebook, this is how my data will be utilized. This is the person actually behind Facebook who is collecting this data. So within Google itself, or within ABC Company Limited, data governance requires that internally they have processes, they have procedures, they have methods of ensuring that when they collect this data, when they utilize this data, when they share this data, they have you in mind. It doesn't matter that you're in Uganda and they are in the US. They owe that ethical duty to you. Because yes, you've shared your entire life, but as a human being, there are certain expectations that are expected from. But with this audience, I thought it was important for me to communicate these issues and give us a good foundation for our next discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stella. I think Stella really gives a very contextual overview of data ethics and governance. And I think at this point now we'll open it for the audience. Based on what, if you post on social media, that comes with some impact. And at this point, I would like to hear from the audience, what are some of the threats that we face when we use social media? And very critical also to hear what are some of the steps one should take to keep safe on social media, on the internet. Just put on your, yeah.
One of the threats, I will speak about an experience as a woman, which I think also very many other women can relate with. If you post on social media, there's a lot of body shaming, or even when you are making a serious point, someone is more interested in what rather not participate at all than to risk being body shamed. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Do you mind sharing some few way forward or steps that one can take then in regard to what you shared?
Okay, so again for women, what I have been able to do and what I think we can do together is to show solidarity for those women. I don't allow a woman to be body shamed and I don't speak up for them. So we have to protect them. We have to call out those abusers and say, you cannot say this about someone. And we have to do that, organizing the sisterhood online, yeah, to prevent that.
Thank you so much. I think the ladies here in the room can really attest to the fact that body shaming is real. And please put up your hand and then I can.
We talk about mental health and depression and all that. I think it all comes from anxiety and all that. You know, I think it's all caused by the whole social media bandwagon of someone is going to post when they might have been invited somewhere. They were not even intended to go, but they are way worse than you are. So I think it puts that's how people get depressed, and then you're like, oh, my classmates are successful and I'm not. So I think depression has all come from this social media. I don't know. There is that, the pressure caused by all these people that post all this and
human being, which is real. And of course, a lot of people then get to depression because of what they face online. Yes, and then the gentleman.
So I have three things, and I'm not sure I'm truly responding to some of your things, but I had some reactions. As you were speaking, you remind me of my lover, who is, I think he could live in the Stone Age period with no data, so he doesn't understand the need to have a WhatsApp story or things like that. Just yesterday, I tweeted, and I'm really horrible at social media, and I was so